Lainey stepped into the cramped little room at the back of the incense shop, inhaling the mingled scents of jasmine, musk, and something that smelled faintly of citrus. The overhead light flickered anxiously against the cracked walls, peeling paint revealing splotches of gray plaster beneath. There was a small round table draped in a velvet cloth, a single chair for the visitor, and another large, high-backed seat for the fortune-teller. A tapestry with faded symbols hung behind her like a theatrical backdrop. Dressed in bright silks and heavy jewelry, the old woman beckoned Lainey to sit with one crooked finger. The entire situation felt cliché, like something pulled from a dusty novel. Lainey wondered why she was even here. The reading had been her friend Jake's idea, a dare after an idle conversation about fate. Lainey had never believed in soothsaying, but she went along for the adventure. The fortune-teller's eyes flashed with an otherworldly light the moment Lainey sat across from her. She produced an ancient deck of tarot cards from a small wooden chest, performed a series of rhythmic shuffles, and spread them out in a half-circle. Each image seemed to stare expectantly at Lainey, as if the illustrated figures held secrets. The woman motioned for Lainey to pick 3 cards. She complied, choosing without looking. Left, right, center. Then she slid them one by one to the fortune-teller. The old woman closed her eyes, paused as though listening to some hidden voice, and flipped the first card. A hush settled over the musty room. Lainey leaned forward, trying to decipher the details. The revealed card depicted a masked figure holding a scythe, surrounded by swirling ravens. The fortune-teller's painted lips trembled slightly, and her brow furrowed. "This card warns of an inevitable event," she said, voice raspy. "Someone close to you will suffer a great loss. It cannot be prevented, yet it must not be denied. A chain of misfortune is about to begin." Lainey swallowed, her throat oddly dry. She wasn't sure if she should laugh off the warning or feel a pang of concern. The second card showed up as the Tower, struck by lightning. Lainey had read enough about tarot to know it symbolized upheaval, ruin, or catastrophe. The fortune-teller's voice wavered. "You will witness something that shakes the foundation of your life. Be careful, for if you do nothing, the consequences will be dire." Stifling an uneasy laugh, Lainey shifted in her seat. This was supposed to be a lark. Fortune-tellers often doled out ominous proclamations to keep customers on edge, or so she believed. The final card spun into view, revealing a chained figure kneeling before a cloaked entity. The fortune-teller hissed as if the card burned her fingers. "You are bound to a fate that has already begun. 3 tragedies will come. Those 3 will break you, one after another. If the chain is not broken, it will continue on, claiming more and more from your life. You must choose to break it or pass it along." Her eyes bored into Lainey's with sudden clarity. "Beware how you respond. Once you have accepted the chain, it can never be undone without a terrible cost." Outside, rain pounded on the tin roof, and lightning illuminated the cramped chamber. Lainey tried to hide her alarm with a small smile, but inside, her heart was drumming. She paid for the reading, hurried out, and arrived home soaked to the bone. She wanted to forget the strange words, but they lingered in her mind. That night, she tried to sleep, but an undercurrent of anxiety sped her pulse. She forced herself to think rationally. Fortune-tellers earned their keep by stirring up dread. Surely that was all. Determined to move on, Lainey fell into an uneasy slumber, dismissing the old woman's theatrical predictions as nonsense. The next morning, a single phone call shattered all her resolve. Jake's mother had died from a sudden aneurysm. The news was abrupt and devastating. Lainey, riddled with guilt, wondered if it was a coincidence or the dreaded first tragedy predicted. She tried to push the thought away, focusing on comforting Jake, but the memory of the scythe and ravens haunted her thoughts. At the funeral the following week, as she stood in the cemetery, the sky remained gray and unyielding, cold rain soaking the black clothes of the mourners. She squeezed Jake's hand, feeling helpless. It felt as though a quiet menace hung in the air, like a half-seen shadow waiting at the edge of her vision. After the funeral, Lainey was left with a sudden obsession. Had she started a chain of fate by visiting the fortune-teller? The absurdity of that notion warred with the creeping sense of dread that had taken root in her mind. In an attempt to get answers, she dragged herself back to that alleyway in search of the shop, only to find it closed. The door was sealed shut, the windows covered with wooden slats. The neon sign that had once flickered in the gloom was gone. Confused and somewhat relieved, Lainey left a note under what she assumed was the door, asking the fortune teller to contact her. Days turned into weeks without any response. During that time, Lainey's nightmares intensified. She dreamed of the tower card, lightning striking a looming fortress, which crumbled like a sandcastle in a storm. In her dream, she was trapped inside, floors collapsing under her feet as she scrambled to find an exit. She'd wake in a sweat, heart hammering, uncertain whether the walls of her real life were likewise set to collapse. Meanwhile, Jake drifted away from her, too consumed by his grief to notice her unraveling. She felt guilty about doubting his feelings, but the tension between them grew daily. While finishing a late-night shift at her part-time job, Lainey received an emergency text from her roommate, Aaron. Water had flooded their apartment's kitchen. Rushing home, Lainey waded into the chaos. Water gushed from a burst pipe and formed a shallow pool across the floor. Pots, pans, and papers were ruined. Aaron, tear-streaked and frantic, pointed at a single line of text scrawled on a piece of soggy, half-shredded mail that had fallen from the fridge. It read, "The chain has begun. Break it or suffer." In the swirl of water and debris, those words struck Lainey like a physical blow. Nobody else would have known about the fortune teller's chain. It made her skin crawl. It took hours to mop up the water, call a plumber, and salvage what they could. By the time Lainey crawled into bed, exhaustion had numbed her fear. Morning brought new complications. Her boss called, furious about a missing deposit slip. She had counted the money a day earlier, certain she'd done it properly, but the record showed a deficit. A gnawing panic bubbled inside her. Did this have anything to do with the chain? She could lose her job, tarnish her reputation, and end up in a financial mess. Was that the second tragedy? The upheaval hinted at by the tower card? Desperate, Lainey set out on a mission to find any trace of the fortune teller. She had no address, just the memory of that small, cluttered back room in the incense shop. She combed the internet, searching for any psychic or tarot reader matching the vague description. Finally, she stumbled on an obscure forum discussing an itinerant fortune teller known for cursed predictions. The few anecdotes she found had one thread in common: cryptic mentions of a chain that either claimed a life or required a sacrifice to end. Darkness weighed on Lainey's heart as she skimmed the stories. She found one woman who wrote that only by passing the chain to another person, convincing them to accept a reading, could the original victim be freed. The alternative sounded even worse, destroying the fortune teller's deck, but at a steep personal cost. Lainey felt trapped. The notion of foisting this curse onto someone else repulsed her, but she feared the alternative meant more tragedies for herself and those close to her. Still, she refused to imagine offering up a random stranger. She tried to rationalize maybe all this was just coincidence, an unfortunate set of events colliding at once. Yet she couldn't ignore the ominous scrawls, the disturbing way each event echoed the tarot reading. One thing was certain: she couldn't keep living in fear, waiting to see if her life would implode. She considered the second option, finding and destroying the deck. For that, the fortune teller's location was crucial, but the old woman had vanished. The only clue remained that closed incense shop. Lainey went back, peering through cracks in the boarded windows. Dust coated everything inside. It looked abandoned for months, not just weeks. On a whim, she circled to the back alley. The door there was ajar, locks broken. Steeling herself, she pushed inside. Faint light filtered in through a hole in the roof, illuminating a dusty corridor. Each step stirred a haze of stale air. The reading room was still intact, the round table in the middle, the tapestry on the wall, but the chest, the one that had held the tarot deck, was missing. An abrupt noise caught her attention. A muffled shuffle. She froze, heart in her throat, scanning the darkness. In a far corner behind a stack of old crates, something moved. "Hello?" she called out. Her words echoed strangely in the confined space. She tried to peer closer. A figure emerged, ragged, disheveled, hair matted with sweat and grime. At first, she couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman, only that they were shivering, with wide, fearful eyes. Then the person whispered, You got the chain, too? Lainey's jaw tightened. Yes, she said, voice barely steady. Did the fortune teller curse you as well? The figure nodded, hugging their knees. From their trembling expression, Lainey gleaned that they'd been driven half mad, stuck there, apparently hoping for the fortune teller to return, searching for relief. They started to ramble about the chain's unstoppable momentum, about disasters that had befallen them, the loss of a job, a friend's accident, a near-fatal confrontation. Their words blurred into a frantic lament. She told me I had to pass it on or find the deck and burn it, they whimpered. I tried to pass it on. I couldn't do it. I felt monstrous. Now I have nothing left. A wave of dread consumed Lainey. She had found someone further along the chain's path, and that person offered no solutions. All that remained was the vague rumor that the deck could be destroyed. But if the fortune teller had fled with it, how could Lainey even begin to locate her? She knelt down, trying to soothe the stranger, but they only shrank away, repeating the same words. We're doomed. We're both doomed. That night, Lainey's dreams clawed at her mind. She saw the second card, the tower collapsing in on itself, burying everything she cared about. Then she saw the final card, the chained figure kneeling before a cloaked presence. In the dream, the chained figure turned its face up to hers, and she realized with horror that it was Jake, eyes hollow with betrayal. She jolted awake, tears burning her cheeks. She couldn't bear the idea of Jake being crushed under the weight of her curse. The next day, she turned on her laptop and scanned every obscure corner of the internet she could think of. She typed in the codes on the forum, joined chat rooms that specialized in occult lore, and begged for hints or rumors about traveling fortune tellers. She discovered an offshoot blog that mentioned sightings of a woman matching the fortune teller's description at a rundown carnival in the next county. Lainey wasted no time. She drove 2 hours through winding back roads to a dilapidated amusement park. Rusted rides creaked in the breeze, and the only sign of life was a sagging tent a short distance from the entrance. Painted letters on the ripped canvas read simply, Fortunes. Cautiously, she made her way inside. Dim, flickering lanterns revealed an unsettling space filled with mirrors that distorted her reflection. At the far end sat a woman who looked remarkably similar to the fortune teller, except younger, or perhaps just in better light. Lainey's pulse hammered as she confronted her. I need to break the chain, she said without preamble. The woman's eyes were a deep, unnerving green. For a moment, Lainey worried she'd found the wrong person. But the woman crossed her arms, a rueful smile tugging at her crimson lips. If it's the chain you carry, I know who you seek, she answered. She's my mother. She sometimes uses this tent, sometimes another. She's never in one place for long. She didn't invite Lainey to sit like the old woman had done. Instead, she stepped forward, scanning Lainey's face with curiosity. Let me guess, you want Mother's deck. Lainey nodded, feeling a prickling chill sweep her arms. The woman's smile shifted, revealing a flicker of pity. Deck is older than she is, older than me, older than anyone can recall. Only its owner can relinquish it. But there's a secret to it. That deck thrives on fear, thrives on the tragedies it predicts. You can only destroy it if the fortune teller willingly passes it to you, which she never does without payment. Lainey's voice trembled. What kind of payment? The woman shrugged elegantly, though the coldness in her eyes betrayed some deeper knowledge. A sacrifice of your greatest treasure. Usually that means your life, or the life of someone you love more than yourself. Mother rarely accepts anything less. That's why the chain is so hard to break. Most who bear it either pass it on or die trying to break it. You might be different. Mother marked you somehow. She never chooses victims at random. Lainey's head spun. Sacrifice someone she loved? Impossible. She'd rather endure tragedy herself than harm anyone else. But the memory of Jake's mother's sudden death, the city of nightmares around her life, the collapsed walls that threatened to bury them all, she felt suffocated by her predicament. Then there's no way, she whispered bitterly. Unless I do the unthinkable and pass it on like a plague to another innocent soul. The fortune teller's daughter watched her, unblinking. If you want to find my mother, she offered quietly, visit the graveyard at midnight on the next full moon. That's her favorite place to do final transactions. She has ties to something older than either of us can imagine. She turned away. The conversation apparently concluded. Lainey left the tent, nerves rattling, heart pounding. As the next full moon approached, Lainey's life continued to unravel. Her boss accused her of embezzlement, and though Jake defended her, the company insisted the missing funds would be traced back to her. Erin moved out, confessing she couldn't stay in an apartment that felt cursed. Lainey sank into an isolated vigil, waiting for the moonlit night. Every clang of a door, every ring of her phone she feared would bring another tragedy. A quiet terror seized her, a suffocating sense that time was running out. Finally, the night arrived. Thick fog rolled across the gravestones as Lainey slipped through the iron gates of the old cemetery. The moon gleamed like a silver disk overhead, casting elongated shadows. In the faint luminescence, she saw the old woman standing near a crooked tombstone, the same shimmering silks and clinking bracelets as before. Although her back was turned, she spoke in that rasping tone that made Lainey's skin crawl. "I knew you'd come," she said. "So few try to end the chain. Most simply pass it on." Carefully, Lainey approached, swallowing her mounting fear. "I won't pass it on," she said, voice tight. "I want your deck. I want to destroy it." The fortune teller slowly turned, her features warped by the half-light, giving the impression of an ancient being beneath the illusions of age. She clutched a small wooden chest protectively against her side. "Why should I give it to you?" she demanded. "You are yet another link in fate's chain. So many have tried and all have failed." Lainey's heart pounded a heavy beat. "The deck isn't your power. It's a parasite. I won't let it continue to feed on innocent people." She drew closer, fists clenched. The fortune teller's eyes flickered to the chest, then back to Lainey. "Would you die for it?" she asked flatly. "Would you see someone you love sacrificed?" Lainey shook her head, tears burning in her eyes. "No, but I'd offer anything else." Dark amusement curved the old woman's lips into a sneer. "You're willing to trade something you don't love for the deck?" She cackled softly. "Brave, naive soul." Her laughter cut off abruptly, replaced by a withering glare. "But the deck demands what we treasure. You can't offer up your hatred, your sorrow, or your emptiness. It will only heed a sacrifice of genuine value." Lainey's thoughts spun in panic. She imagined bringing Jake here, forcing him to be the sacrifice. The idea made her stomach twist in horror. No. She closed her eyes. Could she offer herself? Did she love her own life enough that surrendering it would count? Her hands trembled at the realization. Maybe that was the only path. She took a step closer, breath unsteady, and forced herself to speak. "I'll give you my life," she whispered, voice nearly lost in the swirl of fog. The fortune teller's sardonic smirk faltered. She studied Lainey, then slowly opened the chest. Inside lay the old deck, battered edges gilded with a fading gold. Lainey felt an almost magnetic pull from it. "Come," the woman said. She held out the deck. "But understand, child, once you accept this, the chain is fully yours. To destroy it, you must feed it with the blood of your most cherished possession, your own beating heart. If you falter, you bind yourself to me forever. Do we have a bargain?" Lainey's gaze flicked from the deck to the fortune teller's cold stare. Everything in her body screamed at her to run, but she couldn't let the chain persist. She nodded, feeling tears slip down her cheeks. The moment she touched the deck, a surge of freezing shock coursed through her veins. The night felt heavier. The clouds drifted across the moon, plunging the cemetery into deeper darkness. The fortune teller withdrew a dagger from within her robes, pressing its hilt into Lainey's shaking hand. "End it," she commanded, voice booming in the hush of the tombstones, "or kneel to the chain." Trembling violently, Lainey raised the dagger to her sternum. She felt her heart pound against her ribcage. Every instinct begged for self-preservation. Yet she forced the blade downward, first lightly against her coat, then pressing until the tip pricked flesh. A sharp stab of pain shot through her chest. She hissed, tears blurring her sight. The fortune teller waited, silent as a statue. Lainey's legs wobbled. She thought of Jake's mother, Jake's sorrow, the apartment, the watery scrawl, the stranger in the incense shop, driven mad by the chain. Somehow, she found the strength to push the blade deeper, blood welling around the steel. She gasped, nearly collapsing. In that instant, she slammed the deck to the ground and set it ablaze with a pocket lighter she'd clutched in her other hand. Flames licked hungrily at the old paper. The fortune teller shrieked, lunging forward. Lainey twisted away, wrenching the blade from her chest. A moan of agony tore from her lips, but the deck was engulfed in fire. A wind roared through the cemetery, rattling the branches overhead and sending swirls of ash into the air. The fortune teller's screams seemed inhuman, echoing across the gravestones. However, she did not rush to save the deck, as if bound by the cosmic rule she had invoked. Lainey's legs gave out, and she slumped to the wet grass. Her vision dimmed. The inferno around the deck flared one last time, then extinguished with a hiss, leaving gray remnants. The fortune teller convulsed, then doubled over, her form dissolving before Lainey's eyes into a dark haze that drifted away under moonlight. Lainey lay there, gasping, blood seeping into her clothing. There was a moment of absolute silence, then a faint stirring, like a single breath of wind passing through. Time blurred. Her eyes fluttered closed. She was aware of distant sirens, felt strong arms lifting her, heard urgent voices calling for an ambulance. Through the haze of pain, she heard a final, fading whisper in her mind, a voice that was both the fortune teller's and her own. "The chain is broken. You have paid the price." Darkness closed in. Several days later, Lainey awoke in a hospital bed, her chest bandaged, the beep of the heart monitor a reassuring track of survival. Jake stood at her side, hand wrapped around hers, tears glistening in his eyes. She tried to speak, but her throat was parched. He brought her water, smoothing damp hair from her forehead. Even though her wound throbbed, she felt a curious sense of calm, as though a great weight had lifted. In the following weeks of recovery, she found no cryptic messages, no further tragedies. Jake helped her navigate the accusations at work, which abruptly ceased when the missing deposit slip surfaced. Oddly enough, the manager discovered it pinned under a stuck drawer. Aaron visited, apologizing for leaving so abruptly, and informed Lainey that the apartment's issues had cleared up. It was as if all those sinister events had receded, scattered like leaves before a gale. Sometimes, especially at night, Lainey would remember the dagger pressing into her chest, the deck's final burst of flame, that horrifying shriek. A phantom pain flickered around her scar, and she'd wake up with her heart racing. Yet each time she reminded herself she had broken the chain, or at least set it ablaze. Whether the curse truly died in that cemetery or somewhere deeper in the shadows of fate, she had chosen to step off the path of passing misery to another. She had nearly paid with her life. Over tea one morning, her hands still trembling with weakness, she found the courage to tell Jake the whole story. Instead of looking at her like she was crazy, he clung to every word, face pale. When she finished, he let out a shaky breath. "You saved us," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. Lainey only shook her head, uncertain whether to believe her own tale. But the scar beneath her hospital gown was real, and the memory of scorching flames was all too vivid. Some nights she still dreams of the tombstones and the deck consumed by fire. But the awakened sense of dread no longer grips her. If anything, she feels a tenuous peace that she'd finally confronted the horrifying predictions head-on. Though the nightmares linger like echoes, and the memory of the fortune teller's voice resurfaces in the silent hours before dawn, Lainey trusts in the choice she made. The chain, for now, lies broken, its ashes scattered under a cold moon, and with each new sunrise, she learns again what it truly means to retain hope in the face of fear, forging her own fate, rather than bowing to a curse whispered in the flickering shadows.